This video will show you 5 different ways that you can play some beautiful outside things on a static minor 7 chord. Not just what to play, but also how to get it to sound great. If you're soloing on a static chord, then a great way to make your solo more interesting and surprising is to play something that really rubs against what the listener expects to hear. But you can't just play random notes. It still has to make sense and sound like a melody. And that is what you will learn with some different strategies in this video. My name is Jens Larsen. Learn jazz, make music. The examples are all on a static minor 7 chord, and the first few examples use different chords on top of the harmony. Then later I'm going to cover some other strategies and how they sound. A great place to start is by moving everything down a half step, often referred to as side slipping or sidestepping. This is easy to work with thinking wise, and you can use the same position and the same material while still sounding great. First, let's check out how that sounds, and then I'm going to show you how to get the melodies to connect and make sense, both in terms of getting into the outside section, but also getting out of it. The backing track is a static C minor 7, so the side slip will be a B minor 7 chord. The first part of the solo is just using the C minor Dorian sound, just so that we have a sense of what home is. Then I transition to B minor 7 by using the parallel motion of arpeggios. First I'm playing G minor 7 and E flat major 7 on the C minor 7 chord, and then I use this as a motif to move down to a D major 7 arpeggio, thinking B minor 7. The solo really sits on the C sharp out of that arpeggio, and this creates a lot of tension that's then resolved when I go back to the descending E flat major 7 arpeggio. So I'm really treating it as a chord change and connecting across the chords with motivic development. In that way, the melody makes sense and it's not random. I'm using the same logic to make melodies with B minor 7 as I am on the C minor 7, and it's practical, that's the same chord. This is true for more of the examples in this video, but some can also be used differently as well, like the next one. The only thing you need to be careful with when you connect with motifs is that you don't make the motif too obvious. That sounds predictable and unnatural, but that's of course the same as when you're using motifs in a solo that you're playing on a chord progression. You can use altered dominant lines on top of the chord to make your solo sound more surprising. As you'll hear, this creates tension and movement within the solo in a very natural way. For the C minor 7, the altered dominant is G7 altered, and the G altered scale is the same set of notes as A flat melodic minor. There is a really big advantage to using the altered dominant for this, and I'll explain that in a bit. The advantage with G7 is that you're used to working on improvising lines that resolve to C minor. So it's a lot easier to make lines that resolve back into the sound of the chord, because it is a connection you already know, you already have it in your playing. In this example, I first set up the C minor sound with Dorian and C minor blues, and then transition to the G altered scale, playing a typical G7 altered line using the diatonic arpeggios for F half diminished and B major 7 sharp 5. These are arpeggios that I would normally use for that chord, so you can use the material that you're already using, that you already know. Transition back is done by simply sliding down to resolve from A flat to a sustained G, ending with a C minor pentatonic phrase. If you're looking for more things to play on an altered dominant, then check out the video that I'm linking to in the video description, because that will have a lot of options for you. For the altered dominant, you can also get it to work with more scale-based melodies, which is a simpler way to make melodies and therefore a nice addition to your playing. Here I set up the C minor quickly before moving into the G7 altered line that is essentially just an ascending scale which resolves back, playing a melody that's just the scale played in thirds. Next, let's have a look at what is probably the most common outside suggestion you'll come across. Moving up a half step is a common way to create some outside sounds, and similar to the first example, an easy way to get there, and you can use the same material that you're already playing on the chord that you're on. The example that I'm using here demonstrates another way to move smoothly into the outside part of the phrase, a pivot note. beginning of this example, setting up the sound of the C minor 7 is a little bit more extensive. I'm using more space and also just more different rhythms. Moving up to C sharp minor is done by using E flat as a pivot note. A pivot note is a note that's in both of the chords, C minor 7 and C sharp minor 7. It is the third in C minor 7 and the ninth on the C sharp minor 7. And the melody starts out using it as a third on C minor and then turns it into the top note of a descending arpeggio on C sharp minor 7. The solo goes back to the C minor 7 by simply shifting down a 3-note scale fragment, so just C sharp, D sharp and E. First a basic version in C sharp and then a more embellished version on the C minor 7. Next, let's have a look at a completely different sound and approach to creating outside lines. I should probably also mention that if you want to explore how it is to improvise with these outside strategies and try it out for yourself, then you can use the backing track that I'm using in this video, because that's made by a good friend of mine, Marlo DK, and there's a link to that track on his channel in the description of this video. There is a great trick to using C diminished as an outside sound on a C minor 7 chord. You have a connection between C minor Dorian and the C diminished scale, because you have a lot of common notes in there, but you also have some funny notes like the F sharp, the A flat and the B. The trick is that you can use the major triads of the diminished scale to improvise with and shift those around to create some strong and interesting melodies. In the scale we have 4 major triads: D major, F major, A flat major and B major. All the triads contain very strong, colorful notes over a C minor 7, and since they are triads you can easily use them to create some interesting melodies. In example 4 I use D, A flat and B triads together to create the melody, which sounds like shifting colors on top of the C minor chord. In this example the 4 triads don't really belong to the sound of the chord, but we have another less common sound that can actually shift in and out of the chord sound in a similar way. That's the next thing to check out. The augmented scale is a 6-note scale: E flat, F sharp, G, B flat, B, D and E flat. You can see this as either 2 augmented triads next to each other, so E flat augmented and D augmented, or what is practical in this case, you can see it as 3 major triads in major third distance, so E flat major, G major and B major. In this case, I'm making a link to C minor by using the E flat major triad, which is the upper structure of a C minor 7 chord. And then I'm creating lines by mixing the 3 triads together in different versions. In this example, you hear how the line moves to the B major triad and then to the second inversion G major triad before it plays some scale-based melodies and returns to C minor 7 by resolving the F sharp up to G. If you want to hear examples of this, then this is something that you can find in quite a lot of Michael Breger's solos, where he's shifting around triads in major thirds. As you can see in this video, then practicing and improvising with triads and arpeggios is essential, also when you play outside lines. If you want to explore how to develop your freedom with triads, then check out this video that covers different exercises and can really boost your solos with a ton of options.